Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Now in today's video, guys, I'm going to be doing a full review on the newly released spy thriller Argylle. Now, before I get on to this video, if you haven't checked out my two latest videos, make sure you go check them out. I have a little ranking on all four of the movies that I watched in January, as well as my initial reaction to this movie right after I watched it just last night. So make sure you guys go check them out. Two little short videos. And also, if you haven't watched it yet, make sure you go check out my full review of the ISS movie from a few weeks ago now. Other than that, it's February, so happy February. We got a few other movies on my radar for this month, including Madam Web, which not too thrilled about, doesn't look so good. But we have Lisa Frankenstein, which is very, very interesting. Very curious to see how that one's going to turn out. But other than that, just let's get straight on to the conversation here. I don't have really any other announcements to say. So Argylle, I guess I'm not really so familiar with the universe that this movie is in, and what I mean by that, and I really hope that this is not a spoiler, is that this is apparently a part of the Kingsman universe, and there's going to be a crossover in the future. Now, there was like, not, how would you want to say it? Kind of like a mid-credit scene at the ending of the movie. I was gonna say post-credit, but like mid-credit scene in this movie that reveals like one of the future sequels that's going to be coming up. And I don't think that has to do with the fact that this is a part of the Kingsman universe. So I'm not sure if this is a spoiler or not. I just found this out before watching the movie, and so I was just going to say that I'm not familiar with that universe. I have never watched any of the Kingsman movies. I didn't watch the one that came out a few years ago. I solely went to this movie because the trailers looked very, very fun. They made this movie just look like a whole lot of fun, a really, really good time. I'm a big Matthew Vaughn fan. I really like some of his films, particularly X-Men First Class. I really, really dug that film. I think it's highly underrated. Trailers really sold me on this one. One of the best trailers for 2024 movies that I have seen so far, besides behind maybe Fall Guy, which looks awesome, and I can't wait for that one. But yeah, that's pretty much why I went into this movie. And for the better or for the worse, I did see some reviews before watching this movie, many of which were kind of like a mixed negative, and that might have degraded my experience a little bit and made me a little bit more impatient while watching this movie. And you'll know what I mean when we get further discuss this. But either way, I don't think I'm fully settled on where I land on this movie yet, whether it's mixed negative, mixed positive. I wouldn't say that I'm like strictly good or strictly bad. I'm just kind of in this gray area between slightly negative and slightly positive. And so I guess just going down the line and seeing where I land, we'll start out with the positives here. I really, really enjoyed the first half of this movie, and I think that is all thanks to the really, really great surrounding cast that this movie had. Now, if you're going into this movie for actors like Henry Cavill, John Cena, Dua Lipa, you're not going to get a whole bunch of them in this movie. They are in, like a pretty significant scene at the beginning of the movie, and then don't come back until like the end of the movie. So if you're, wondering about that, or you're coming to this movie for that, they are not in this movie very much. In the scenes that they are in this movie, though, they do a very, very great job. I really, really enjoyed them. But the two main leads in this movie, the two ones running the show, would be Bryce Howard and Sam Rockwell, which I really enjoyed their chemistry in this movie. Sam Rockwell adds just an even more goofiness to the already silly and over-the-top action sequences that this movie has, and I just really like Sam Rockwell in general. I think he's a very, very funny comedian. And then you have Bryce Howard, of course, who I really like kind of her squeamish personality, especially at the beginning half of this movie, where she's just this author who writes books about spies, but she's not really meant to be a spy herself. And so when she's doing all this stuff that spies do, smashing people's heads, taking out bad guys, jumping off buildings and whatnot, she's very squeamish about it, very, very scared to do it. And you just got Sam Rockwell like, come on, what are you doing? And so it just really, really great chemistry there between the two, and really enjoyed that first half for that reason. You have a few small scenes with some of those bigger names like John Cena and Henry Cavill in here that I really, really enjoyed. Namely, you had that train sequence that was heavily advertised in the trailers. That was probably the best action sequence of the movie. I really enjoyed it. There was like some body swapping going on between Sam Rockwell and Henry Cavill, and you switch from like goofy with Sam Rockwell to like serious with Henry Cavill, but kind of in a funny way where he's like pointing at you and winking at you and doing all these like funny gestures and whatnot. And so I really, really enjoyed that scene. Very, very great. So yeah, that first half off to a very, very great start. Got the ball rolling. Definitely had me on my feet and invested quite a bit. And so yeah, think that was all of the positives that I had. I know that doesn't seem like a lot. So moving into the mixed, and I decided, after thinking about it for a while since last night, that I would put this in the mixed category. And this was a main complaint for a lot of people for this movie. A lot of people had this. This was one of their main negatives. But I decided to put this in the mix because I don't think it's necessarily the reason why I disliked this movie. And that is the movie's runtime. Now, I think that there is definitely an argument that can be made that on both sides, that this movie is too long, or that they could have utilized the runtime better. But I don't think anybody agrees that this movie utilized its runtime very well. And I think that just that back half is extremely mishandled with some of the stuff they do, and I'll talk about that when we get into the actual negatives. But I put the runtime in the mix here because it's certainly an issue with this movie, and because of other bigger issues, it kind of just, it lands here because it's not necessarily the runtime's fault, but it's kind of mishandled. And I think that this movie could have worked for being 2 hours and 20 minutes. Most action films, obviously, hour 45 to 2 hours long. So it does seem a little bit lengthy. And I think even if it was handled right, would be at least a little bit longer than you would typically prefer. But I just think that if things were handled a little bit better, it wouldn't be such a big issue. And that's not necessarily the reason why I disliked this movie. And it doesn't really help when, like I said, I was kind of impatient with this movie. I was very tired, getting very drowsy towards the back half of this movie, very late. And so, you know, I always have at least 5 movies throughout the year that are kind of like that, where I'm just very tired watching them, and it kind of deteriorates the experience a little bit. But yeah, that's all I got there. Let's move into the negatives. So the main issue that I have with this movie is, like I said, the second half of this movie, very mishandled for me, where I feel like it wasn't necessarily that the twists were unpredictable or were predictable. It's just that I feel like a lot of them didn't work for me. And there was a lot of characters that were thrown in here that were kind of a part of twists as well that, like I said, just didn't really work for me. And I get that this movie does have quite a bit of mystery tied to it. A big conversation going into this movie was, who is the actual Agent Argylle? And so I get it. You know, it's a spy thriller mystery. It's got a whole bunch of different genres kind of mixed into it. You got spy, action, thriller, mystery. So it's kind of a whole lot of different things tied together. You got a little bit of that mystery here and that meta commentary in there, where it's like, who's the actual Agent Argylle and all this other stuff. And I feel like the movie oversaturates itself with the mystery stuff a little bit too much, to where I think it should have just stuck to being a spy thriller rather than trying to tie in all this convoluted stuff and turn into this Mission Impossible like story where you know, just all these overlapping plot lines and characters and all this kind of stuff, turning into not even Mission Impossible, just like kind of like this, like the early Saw sequels. And I just don't think that was very necessary. I'm not saying it was that to that degree of confusing, but there was just a bunch of characters thrown in here in the back half of the movie and twists thrown in here that, while not necessarily being predictable, I just don't think worked very well for me. I think it should have just been a lot more straightforward, maybe have 1 or 2 very strong twists here and there, and I think it would have worked a lot better for me, and spend a lot more of that back half just with these over-the-top action sequences and whatnot, which, ironically enough, I feel like this is another negative for me. Some of the over-the-top action sequences were a little bit too silly even for my liking. And I think that just largely had to do with some of the characters that were doing some of the things that they were doing. It's not convincing of them to do the things that they did. Kind of like how I said with Bryce Howard, beginning of the movie, very squeamish about things, very hesitant with, killing people and whatnot, and back half of the movie starts to get a little bit more comfortable, and then she kind of turns into her own, kick-ass, girl boss by the ending of the movie. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing because, I don't want to see female empowerment or whatever. I'm not complaining about this movie being a feminist or whatever. That's not where I'm going here. I'm just saying that it's not it's not very convincing of somebody like Bryce Howard to do some of the things she did at the back half of the movie, where you got her like spinning around with, 2 assault rifles in each of her hands and just mindlessly killing, firing her gun and taking out a bunch of bad guys. Not very convincing of a character like that to do that. And maybe they were trying to set something up where, like, okay, she's starting to get a little bit more comfortable. Back half of the movie, no longer squeamish, turns into this kind of badass. And I kind of get that, but I don't know. I don't think it was very convincing from that character that they had established for her to do that. And I feel like they should have just had, Sam Rockwell, run some of those action scenes, or just pull in another actor or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, that was kind of another issue, although quite insignificant for me in this movie. But I just think that the main one being that I think that the back half was kind of mishandled, should have been a lot more straightforward, shouldn't have tried to tie in all this convoluted stuff at the back half, and just, maybe throw in 1 or 2 really, really strong twists, like I said, nothing more there. So, that's about it. I hope I'm not missing anything, but I would just say that if you're going into this movie for Henry Cavill, Dua Lipa, John Cena, that's not where you're going to get here. You're going to get Bryce Howard and Sam Rockwell very much running the show here, and I really, really enjoyed them. And I think that's what really brought up this movie for me. And overall, the entire surrounding cast, no matter how little some of them were in here, you even had Samuel L. Jackson thrown in here. I don't know if I mentioned him yet. I probably did. I'm probably repeating myself here. But really great surrounding cast, enough to keep you entertained for the most part through much of the movie. And so the runtime, not too much of a complaint for me, I would say, but definitely this movie could have been handled a little bit better and could have been like the entirety of its trailer, which was to say very, very fun and enjoyable. So Argylle, I think I'm gonna settle on kind of a mixed positive with this movie. I would give it a 6 out of 10. I'm not going to give it any more than that. I was feeling a little bit generous, maybe giving it a 6.5 out of 10. I'm going to settle on a 6 out of 10. This movie could have been a lot better. Easily could have been a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10. And that first half of the movie, definitely up there. 8 out of 10 to 9 out of 10 for sure. Second half, that's where it kind of lost me a little bit. So, Argylle, I'm not saying I do not recommend this movie. If you're really into spy thrillers and whatnot, I think you're going to enjoy this movie overall. You might find it a little bit too lengthy for your liking, but I think you will enjoy it quite a bit nonetheless. And so, yeah, those are kind of just my critiques for this movie. Like I said, not really sure, but I think I'm going to land on kind of a mixed positive with this movie. So that's all I got. Make sure you stay tuned for the future content, and future reviews. We got a few more coming in February, and I'll try to be thinking of some short form content that I can throw here and there in between the full reviews and whatnot. As always, I'm always open to suggestions, so let me know in the comment section down below. And I think that's all I got for you guys. So let me know what you think about Argylle in the comment section. That's all I got. Like and subscribe, guys, and I will see you next time.